everybody, it's Christy with Legion Dog and Cat Supply. I'm coming to you today with our third video in our Build a Bowl series for January. I am coming to you today to kind of go over like different types of shelf-stable foods for dogs or cats and the difference between them, and I'll kind of show you some examples. So we've already talked about ingredients, and we're not going to dive into that, just the processes. So traditional kibble for a dog or cat. We know these are like those proteins, grains, legumes, or peas, and they are basically like ground down and they're mixed thoroughly into like a dough consistency. Then companies will use like high steam and high heat going up to like 400 degrees. And then they use a really high pressure, and that heat forms it or forces it through an extruder. And then it puts it into a die that makes the shapes, and then it cuts the kibble into shapes as it's forcing it through this machine. So the higher temperature sterilizes those ingredients, gelatinizes the starches for better digestibility for your pet. It also degrades nutrients because it is at such a high temperature, specifically like certain vitamins and minerals. So most kibble, after it is cooked, is then dried using heat anywhere from like 200 to 300 degrees to remove any moisture, so that it is shelf stable. Once it's completely cooked and finished, then they actually spray like generally a fat or an oil back onto the kibble with those vitamins, minerals, amino acids that were broken down and lost during that cooking process back onto the foods. And a lot of times these are synthetic vitamins and minerals. Not all companies use synthetic vitamins and minerals, but a lot of them do. So what's important to know is that high heat kills germs and cooks the starches. Like rice needs to be cooked before you can eat it. Like if you've ever eaten a grain of rice, it's really crunchy and not really easy to digest. And of course, once it's cooked, it's significantly softer. So it's the same for beans and peas. It just definitely more digestible once it's cooked. But those also, like once they're cooked, they do, and dried all that moisture out, do create that crunchy texture of kibble. So that whole process with extrusion is super fast, and it makes it an affordable way for the consumer to be able to buy foods at a cheaper cost because they can make it like faster and quicker. Some companies will cook at a lower temperature to hold on to those nutrients, and there's absolutely, definitely other ways that we're going to talk about. So the next one to talk about is going to be oven-baked foods. So depending on the company, these can be cooked at much, much lower temperatures. Not always. Sometimes they can crank up that temperature, and they're going to cook it for longer time frames and in smaller quantities, in smaller batches. So cooking at those lower temperatures, of course, is going to hold onto those nutritional ingredients, not degrading near as many of those vitamins and minerals and the flavors that traditional extrusion methods and that steam, like churning and pushing it through at a high temperature does. So not all companies are going to reveal like the temperature to which they oven cook. Some still cook at a very high temperature, but a lot of them will definitely advertise that they cook at those lower temperatures. And sometimes these don't have to have a lot of those vitamins and minerals like sprayed back on them at the end of cooking. So definitely leaves a little bit of a crunchier texture to the food, kind of more like a cereal crunch. And some of them are super easy to crunch. It makes it a little easier for dogs with sensitivities to some of those other like synthetics and things that aren't necessarily needed to be sprayed back on at the end. So can be a little bit easier for those with sensitive bellies. Next to talk about is going to be like your air dried foods. So air dried foods are generally much higher in a protein and nutrient dense. Not all of them, of course, you got to check those ingredients labels. But basically they are going to form that food with higher protein and like vegetables, fruits, things like that. And then they are going to cook it with basically an air dryer. It's going to be like a big at 140 to 180 degrees, much larger than what we have in our standard kitchen, I'm sure. And that warm air is just going to circulate and remove the moisture from the food through evaporation, and it leaves it with like a jerky consistency. And these are a little more natural type along the forms of a dog's natural diet, and they can be great for dogs with sensitivities, sensitive stomachs, picky eaters. Air dried can be more expensive. It's a longer process. And of course, it's going to be a little more nutrient dense than kibbles. And a lot of them are complete meals. Some of them are not. So always check for that AFCO statement, of course. But since they are like slowly cooked, they aren't going to need those. Most of their nutrients are held on to, so they don't need those spray-ons at the end. Generally, don't a lot of them advertise that they don't have like harmful um, byproducts from being cooked, or AGEs from being cooked at super high temperatures. So a lot of people will use them as toppers or as high value training treats. So another way to view those as well. Cold press is another form of making a shelf stable kibble. And this is basically like putting those ingredients, those like straight whole meat proteins, fruits, veggies, and then rapidly chilling those raw ingredients. And then they'll use a low temperature, about 140 degrees. So if you think like a smokehouse or something like that, and gentle pressure, the food is like shaped into kind of smaller nuggets or chunks, and therefore preserving like those nutrients, those vitamins, minerals. They generally can have up to like 3 times the amount of meat-based proteins than traditional kibbles. And then some companies will cold press and then cook in an oven. So it's just interesting ways that they can do things instead of using that extrusion method and that like 400 or 500 degrees, shoving it through something. They can use a cold press method and then oven bake it. So just some different methods. And then lastly, dehydration is another method that some companies will use. And these foods are generally like cooked or roasted. A lot of times, similar to how like human food would be made in a stew or something like that. And then they are slowly dehydrated at a low temperature for some time to slowly draw out all that moisture. So this will hold on to those nutritional values, those vitamins, those minerals, and whole foods. So as a dehydrated food, you would truly, it is going to be much more compact than like a traditional bag of kibble. You would rehydrate it with water and let it sit for a few minutes, creating like a moist diet for your dog, which is great for dogs that have like dental work, things like that, picky eaters. And some companies, like the Honest Kitchen that we sell at the store, have a base mix. So if you have like dogs with protein issues, you can rehydrate that base mix to make sure you're getting all those AFCO vitamins and minerals, and add the proteins that are needed as well. So with that, I just kind of want to show some differences in kibble. So here we have some different kibbles. Like this is just a traditional kibble that we sell in the store. Here's an oven baked, but it's kind of cooked at a higher temperature, so you can tell it's quite hard. I can't necessarily break it in my hand. This one is cold pressed and then oven baked, so you can see it definitely breaks very easy in my hand. It's like that cereal type texture for sure. This is a just a cold press. That has not been like baked. It's say it didn't really snap. It just kind of breaks apart like a meat chunk. These are some air dried samples that we have at the store. This one I believe is Badlands Ranch, and it just breaks apart. It kind of looks like a beef jerky. And then this one is Open Farms, air dried, and it just kind of snaps loose. You can see like more of that meaty texture. So again, just I kind of wanted to show you guys what some of these look like. And as always, we are always ready to help with any of the questions or issues, or if you have that picky eater, or you're just wanting to look for a topper, a good training treat, something that is full of protein and nutritious. Swing on in, and any of us at Legion can help you out. We'll see you soon.